Okay, so hopefully everybody can see my screen. If somebody would just put in the comment box on the right to let me know that you can see my screen. It's a slide. Okay, perfect. Thank you, Osama. Appreciate it. All right, and keep in mind that you guys can put down questions, your questions anytime in the comments box. What I will do is when I open it up for Q&A, I will go through the questions in the comments. If you have any thoughts, comments, feel free to put them in the comment box anytime. All right. So, okay. So a little bit of background about myself. Some of you who joined us last week will already see this, but for folks who are new, just to introduce myself, I grew up in Singapore. I went to college in the US. I went to upstate New York for college, small liberal arts college, and majored in international studies, minored in econ. So did not have a business background coming out of college. So for folks who are worried that you don't have a business undergrad degree, is business school still the right path for you? You know, certainly business schools are agnostic in terms of the major that they're looking for. They are looking for liberal arts majors, business majors, STEM majors as well. So they are looking for diversity. I went to the Stanford GSB, and before that, I actually worked on Wall Street at JP Morgan, for 2 years, and also worked at a management consulting firm for 2 years as well. And post GSB, I worked primarily in product management in the healthcare and health tech companies for big Fortune 500 companies as well as startups. So that's a little bit of background about myself. Now, for the topics we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about what the GSB is looking for in its applicants. We're also going to talk specifically about its essays, as well as the specific short questions that the GSB asks. And then at the end, we'll give you some information about our company, as well as open it up for Q&A. Just so you know, there are some, of course, a lot of other components in the application that are core, very similar to the other schools' applications, like the resume, recommendation letters. So we're not going to cover those specifically. We're going to focus more on the essays and the short questions that are unique to the GSB. Okay. So let's dive in. What is the GSB looking for? Primarily, the GSB is looking for leaders, and we will break that down more granularly into 3 big buckets. The first area is academic track record, and we'll actually look a little bit about the average Gmat score and the GPA in the slide next that's coming up, to give you more specificity about what level of Gmat, what level of GPA would fit the typical profile. But essentially, to evaluate your academic track record, they're ultimately looking for very smart people in their class. They look at your standardized testing in the form of the Gmat and the GRE. I should add on to the slide. The GRE is accepted as well. But apart from that, they also look at your track record in undergrad. And if you have a graduate degree, they also look at how you did in your graduate degree as well, in the form of your GPA. Okay, so they also will consider your professional credentials. For example, if you took the CPA, the CFA, Series 7, these are some of the tests that are for the finance sector, the accounting sector. So some of you would be familiar with it. If you don't have these credentials in your industry, certainly whatever other credentials that you had to take to excel, to do well in your industry, those are certainly hallmarks that you have the academic capability to do well in business school. So that's the first bucket. It's by no means the most important bucket, certainly an important one, but they do look at 2 other buckets. They try to look at your profile holistically. So the second bucket is, of course, your professional track record. They are looking for a top performer. They're looking for evidence that you are doing well at work. any promotions, awards, recognition. And even if you don't have promotions, for example, if you work in a firm that where the hierarchy is very flat, they would also want to see that you are getting increasing responsibilities. For example, that you're managing bigger projects or bigger budgets, perhaps teams, or starting to mentor summer interns or junior staff. So all of this is evidence that you are a top performer, you're doing well. And of course, the primary way, two or three primary ways that they look at this would be, of course, looking at your resume to understand what you have done, and of course, looking at your recommendation letters to get a better feel for how you perform at work and what you do at work. Okay, so that's the second bucket of professional track record. And then the third bucket is extracurriculars and personal interests. So it's a little bit of catch-all. Is not as is a little bit nebulous actually, and that's because really this is an area where it's up to you. What do you do on weekends? Some people like to do a lot of sports. Other people like to do a lot of volunteering with their community, and perhaps even other people are very active in with their religious organization, and that's totally fine. And I've had clients in the past who say, "Look, every weekend I go out and I'm an avid photographer. I take a lot of photographs. I go to different neighborhoods, and that's absolutely fine as well. They just want to know, what do you do on weekends? Who are you outside of work?" And that's an area where we think that it's a great opportunity to differentiate yourself, not just showcase who you are, what you're personally passionate about, but also if there's any opportunity to take leadership roles, be more engaged with your community. This is an area where they certainly pay a lot of attention to, and gives you a lot of opportunity to differentiate yourself. Okay, so those are the three big buckets of things that the GSB looks for, and to go into some specifics into the stats, and you can see that, this is a table that we have compiled, and you can find this in our guide as well for Stanford that you can download for free on our website. So do take a look at this. You will see that the average Gmat score over the years has crept up a little bit. So starting in the right-hand column, the class of 2011 had an average Gmat score of around 730, and the latest class of 2021 that we have stats for, the average Gmat score was around 734. So it's crept up a little bit over the years. However, that's the average. That means that half the people are above, half the people are below. And if you look at the Gmat range, again, you will see a pretty wide range that they accept. So the latest range for the class of 2021 goes from 600 to 790. So if you have a Gmat score that's below the average, certainly do not be disheartened. That is one data point that they look at, and hopefully it falls within the range of 600 to 790. And then there are also other statistics to give you an idea of what is the typical GSB student coming in to that class. For example, class of 2021 has around 4.6 years of work experience, average years of work experience when they enter the class. But again, you certainly, if you look at the range of the years of work experience, it goes from 0 to 14. So there's a pretty broad range. However, it looks like most people, the average is around 4.6. So this table gives you a sense for what the typical class would look like for the GSB, and if you fall within that range, you're certainly are more than qualified to apply and get into the class. Certainly, you want your Gmat score to be as close to the average as you can to be competitive, and just because it's a very competitive process for the GSB. So let's move into essays, which I think is, really a hallmark of the GSB application. They have a very famous essay of what matters most to you and why. And that essay hasn't changed for, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, or even longer. It was the essay that I wrote when I applied to the GSB, and certainly took a lot of time, caused me a lot of angst, as well as, prompted me to really think about, self-reflect and really kind of dig deep. So it's a truly wonderful essay to write, as well as difficult essay to write. Now, just a couple of, tips, just as you start thinking about how to approach the essay. So first of all, don't worry that you don't have a brand new, fresh answer to what matters most, right? A lot of people will say that what matters most to them is family. I think actually a very high percentage, I saw a survey a few years ago, very high percentage of people say that what matters most to me is my family. And still, a ton of people get in using this answer. But ultimately, don't, I think, the trick here is not to be too creative about, or not to be too smart about what matters most to you. Really, you want to be authentic. You want to think about truly something, your answer must be true to who you are. And then certainly a lot of people who ask me, well, isn't it a cliche if I say family matters most? And a lot of people are writing about that. It's not a cliche if it's true to who you are, and also is not the theme that's going to get you in. Is really your specific stories that's going to get you in. So if you think about all the, a lot of the wonderful books or movies in the world, a lot of them would be, love story, right? Person A meets person B, falls in love. There's a, challenge in the way or a hurdle. But ultimately, it's the execution, it's the details of the stories of, stories specific to your family or things specific to you that are going to bring your essay to life. Okay, so now the length of what matters most, it used to be a little bit longer. I think a few years ago, it was 750 words was the recommended length. And over the years, Stanford has reduced the recommended length. And the most recent recommendation is around 650 words. And what they found was that the longer the essay, the more people were trying to jam in, stories that, to showcase what they did and things like that, that may not be entirely related to what matters most. So they find that streamlining the word count has actually helped people focus a little bit more. And certainly when I work with clients, I find that with 650 words, you really have to distill it down to truly what matters most to you, and not try to cram in other stories as well. And you will see in the short questions, which I'll cover in the next section, they do allow you an opportunity to talk about other achievements that may or may not tie directly to what matters most. So they have, while they've taken away words from the first essay, they've given you more space in the short questions to allow you to really showcase some of your achievements. And then two other tips: be succinct, be to the point, direct, but personal. So really, the key to the writing style for these essays is, that you be able to read it out aloud, and it flows, and it's not, you're not tripping over your words. It's it's not a 10-line sentence. We don't want that. We want it to be very simple, very clearly written, but at the same time, be very personal. If you can imagine yourself writing a letter to a good friend and really talking about, your personal stories of what matters to you, I think that is, kind of that's going to be the secret trick to a successful what matters most essay. So let's give you a little bit more specifics about how you might think about, what are the stories that go into this essay. As you brainstorm, here are some major questions that would be good to ask yourself. And this live stream is recorded. You can watch it on YouTube after that. So if you don't have time to copy down all the questions, you can rewatch this video. So a few of the big questions that can help provide food for thoughts, for some thinking and self-reflection. Who am I as a person? What are my core values? And of course, who am I as a person is a huge question, very deep, very philosophical. So if you can't answer that, don't worry, but think about what are your core values that have driven you? What are the core values that you learned from your parents or from your family that have really been your true north as you navigated your college life, your career. So think about what these core values are. Think about what are the inflection points in my life. What are some of the big events that happened in my life that really kind of changed the direction of my life, for better or for worse, right? What change did they bring? What are my greatest achievements? What motivated me psychologically, philosophically? What did I learn about myself? Why did I pursue these achievements? And what made them great achievements? What was so hard? What was so easy about them? What did I like? What did I not like about these achievements? What are my goals in my career? What are my goals in life? How did I come up with these goals, right? What are at their roots? What motivates me to pursue these goals? What have been my greatest setbacks? What have I learned from these failures and challenges in my life or my career? And then what unifies my best moments? So a lot of deep reflective questions here. And this is to spur brainstorming, to really kind of get those creative juices and self-reflection going. You're probably not going to be able to fit everything into the essay. And so let's think about what could be some structures of fitting in some narratives that have worked for this essay. The first one is thematically. Thematically would be say a sentence that answers the question of what matters most to you, and that is the kind of the more intuitive approach that most people will say, okay, what matters most to me? You come up with one answer. So an example that we have here is building morale. So if you're a candidate who says, what matters most to me is I'd like to build morale in other people in my team. I like to make sure that, there's positive energy in anyone that I interact with in any team that I'm contributing to. So that would be the core theme that will tie different stories together. And that is essentially your answer to what matters most to you, is to make a positive impact on morale of other people in the team, right? So some stories, some examples that you could use then in the essay to really illustrate this and explain how this came about. You could talk about, and this is an example from an applicant, a hypothetical applicant. So you could mention a story that perhaps you had at work as a project manager, and how you lobbied the client and created incentives for demoralized employees to complete the work. So that could be one example. You could use a personal example of how you conducted a wellness retreat with another firm in the middle of a salad challenge. So this is very specific. So that, using weekly yoga sessions and to create this wellness retreat. So that would be more on the health and personal side. You could use an example of, in college, you were perhaps involved with theater, and you navigated a difficult board dynamic, and you achieved harmony there. You could also use a very personal, family example of traveling with your grandmother to Hungary for a week. So those are just some examples that support your theme, that you like to instill positive morale, positive energy in people that you work with or that you are impacting. So that's one approach, is the thematic approach. Another approach is to use a single individual accomplishment to give the reader a view into your bigger approach to life. So we say here in the first bullet point, using a single micro example to serve as a window into your macro, the larger approach to life. So in this example, using kind of that the similar candidate, you could talk about the experience of taking the grandmother to Hungary, and how then that has impacted you, and what it shows about your life philosophy of helping to lift other people up, right? So you could certainly use that approach and have your essay be tailored around one story, and use that as a reflection on other, how did that come about? How has that affected other aspects of your life? So that's the second approach. And then there is a third approach of discussing a personal story. So in this approach, it tends to work better if you have inflection points, if you have certain events in your life that really changed the course of your life. So one example could be you were in banking, and you realized that your passion was in cooking or food, and you shifted to working in the restaurant industry. So that is a major inflection point that changed the trajectory of your life, and you could talk about that journey and talk about what motivated you to pursue a change in your life. Where did that come about? So using this journey approach of weaving together a couple of stories along the way can reveal to the reader your values, your motivations, your self-reflection, how you think about your strengths and weaknesses, and so on. So it's certainly the danger with this approach is, you might want to kind of list everything that happens in your life, and it's not a biography. So you do have to be very selective in choosing the stories that really fit that narrative. Okay, so that would be another approach of discussing a personal journey. And then a fourth approach is to use different stories to reveal different aspects of your candidacy, of your profile. So we call it the Mosaic Approach. So it's similar to a personal journey narrative, but it's not tied together chronologically. And you also might want to think about perhaps using a unifying construct, not so much like a clear theme as in the first approach, but perhaps so talk a little bit about if you're talking about the different characteristics, you might want to say something like, where did that characteristic come from, right? So I inherited my hard work, the work ethic from my dad, and my creativity from my mom. So you could, try to give the reader a sense for where did all these different aspects come from. What we have found with this approach is that it does, with 650 words, and also with the way that the GSB essay question is written, what matters most to you, it can be a little bit difficult to make it work for the GSB essay. It might work better for the HBS essay, in fact, because for the GSB, they are looking for one answer of what matters most to you. So using a mosaic approach to talk about different things that matter to you may not exactly answer the overriding question of what matters most to you, singular, right? So this approach you could certainly use for other schools' essays, but for the GSB essay, maybe not the best approach, but certainly wanted to give it, throw it out there as an option. So those are the some ideas, some ways that you can think about approaching the what matters most to you essay. There's also, of course, the short questions, which I mentioned just now is an opportunity for the GSB, for you actually, to showcase your other achievements, all of the stories that you might have that may not fit into what matters most. So let's take a look at specifically what these short questions are. And there's a ton of confusion about these short questions. These short questions appear in your application form. When you create an account and you scroll through the application form, there will be a section. They call it optional, but certainly it's a great opportunity for you to share more about yourself and your achievements. Certainly take advantage of the opportunity. And there are two questions. At least this is what it was for the last application season. The new one hopefully will stay the same. And what we have seen in the past is that there are two opportunities where you can put down your stories, and there's a text box that you can put your answers in. The first one is think about times you've created a positive impact, whether in professional, extracurricular, academic, or other settings. What was your impact? What made it significant to you or to others? And you actually have an opportunity to give up to 3 different examples. And they are, the word or the character limit is 1,200 characters each. So it's 1,200 times 3. There are 3 text boxes, and they do not need to link together like a short essay. They can be very discrete. You don't need to worry about, transitioning from one story to another. You don't need to worry about connecting them. It can be different parts of your different time periods of your life, different aspects. It could be, one could be a professional story, another could be an academic, another could be an extracurricular, right? So these are discrete short examples that you can give. So you can give up to 3 for the first one, okay? And 1,200 characters is around 200 words. And if you look specifically at what they're asking you, they have given you a lot of guidance as to what they want to hear from you. They want to know, number 1, what was your impact? So what did you do? Number 2, they want to know what made it significant to you or others. So for each short example, you want to talk about 2 things, and 1,200 characters is probably enough space to just talk about 2 things. So you want to describe what did you do and the outcome, and then you want to describe why was it significant. Okay, so 2 points you want to cover for each short example for the first question. Then there's also a second short question, which is completely separate from the first question. And that's also optional, but again, take advantage of it. Tell us about a time within the last 3 years when your background influenced your participation at work or school. So they are actually looking for 2 things in this short question. So there's only 1 text box, so there's only 1 example, and it's 1,100 character limit. And they're looking for 2 things within this 1 example. 1, they want to know a little bit about your background, right? So the question is, tell us about a time when your background influenced your participation at work. So 1, a little bit about your background, and 2, how did it influence your participation at work or school? What happened, right? So there are 2 things that you need to share for this short question, the second short question. Okay, so those are the 2 short questions that should hopefully remain unchanged this year. And that pretty much wraps up the unique aspects of the Stanford GSB application. If you would like more information, I will point you to a lot of the resources that we have on our website. Not only do we have a lot of webinars and events like these, we also have the complete start to finish guide, insider guides by specific schools. So some of the charts that you've seen today come from those that guide for Stanford. So take a look at it. When it comes time to interviews, we have interview guides as well. And certainly, if you would like to discuss your profiles more specifically, sign up for a free 30-minute consultation. You can submit your resume online and we will review it before we get onto the call with you and answer your specific questions. Okay, so just a little bit about our services. You can look up all of these on our website as well. So I will like to use the rest of the time for Q&A, and this is just a glimpse at all of the consultants that you can choose to speak with, and you're paired one-on-one with our consultants should you decide to work with us. So usually you'd want to speak with the person you would like to work with. You can click on our bios on our website and have there's a quick video as well that you can watch for each consultant. So do take advantage of that to see whose background and work style resonate most with you. Okay, so I will open it up for, let's see, for a Q&A. And, oh gosh. I hope I was sharing my slides just now, that you guys were able to see all my slides. Okay, I will look in the comments section. Okay, and I'm going to start going through the questions here. Okay, what would be the right procedure for filmmaking undergrad degree? Good question, and I think that is definitely coming from a non-traditional background for business school. I'm going to assume that, and this is from Adija. Adija, are you working in the film industry right now? So I think if that assumption is correct, what you want to do is really kind of explain why you want to make the pivot into the business side. What positions are you interested in? I assume that you want to get into the business side of the creative industry. So think about talking to folks who have an MBA in the industry. Ask them about what specific skill sets they learned from business school that was very helpful to them, and really you want to make a case to Stanford for what you can learn from, not just what you can learn from the business program that will allow you to transition to the business side, but also what perspectives, what insights, what are you going to bring to contribute to the business classroom. So I think these two things are important to think about as you structure your essays, not just the what matters most to you essay, but also the why Stanford essay, which is a second essay that they ask about, and that's a great opportunity to convey your career goals in that second essay. Okay, Arvind, I have experience of 10 years, all in different parts of India. I'm looking forward to learning the entrepreneurship learnings from the school. Is the MBA program good for me? Yeah, definitely. The MBA program at Stanford, there's a huge entrepreneurship component to it, a lot of resources. And there's I covered this quite a bit last week in last week's video as well. So take a look at the YouTube recording from last week. And we do talk about what the entrepreneurship resources and opportunities are for folks interested in that. Okay, we have another question: how to cover the leadership skills in the MSX program, provided the candidate has 9 years of experience, but haven't got solid platform to showcase these skills explicitly. Okay. I think that if you have 9 years of work experience, you certainly want to showcase what you have done in the 9 years. What are your achievements? They're not just looking for you to be leading teams or managing people. They want to know what is the impact of your work on the on your team or on your firm. And I will give you a quick example, personal example for me. When I was working at JP Morgan, certainly big bank, a year or two out of college, I was not, running teams or projects by any means. What I noticed was we had a very manual process of checking reports every day, every morning, and I wrote a short program that connected to the database and sucked up all the data, formatted it into a nice report every morning that was automatic and just saved us a lot of time. So they're looking for you to see where the problems are within your team, within your group, and take initiative to make things better. So that's also leadership as well. So hopefully that helps you address the question. Okay. Question from Ram: what does the GSB look for in the entrepreneurship profiles? If anyone has multiple examples for leadership stories, how elaborate should each specific leadership example be? That's a good question. As we know, entrepreneurs wear a lot of hats in their startups. What you want to think about is giving examples that are not just repeating or not overlapping, right? So if you give an example about, resolving conflict within the team, you don't want to turn around and give another example of the same thing. So think about showcasing different sides of your skill sets. Interpersonal skills, perhaps analytical skills, perhaps leading or motivating a team. So if you are able to showcase, just different facets of the work that you have done, I think that would make it a really interesting essay and help the admissions committee evaluate your profile holistically. In terms of how elaborate each example should be, this of course depends on where you're putting it. If you're putting it in the short questions, you're limited to 1,200 characters. So as much as you can fit in for 1,200 characters, how deep do you want to go? So just pay attention to the word count. Okay, what is the average score for the MSX program? I'm assuming you're talking about the Gmat score. So for the MSX program, I believe it is around 700 or 710. So it's a little bit lower than the 2-year the MBA program. That's the average. But you can look at it online. I think the GSB does report that average statistics. Okay, we have a question. Is work experience necessary for an MBA in Stanford? Ideally, yes. I think I have seen, some perhaps PhD students or master's graduate students apply without specific full-time work experience, but they have had a ton of other experience, perhaps, running research projects or, being a TA. So they have had some other experience in that form. It is quite rare for people to get accepted into the GSB straight from college without full-time work experience. It happens. I think in my GSB class was maybe 1 or 2 out of 360 people. So it gives you a sense for how kind of rare it is. Okay. Okay, so let's move on to another question. from Ram, asking about document evidence of achievements, awards, and extracurriculars. Typically, what happens after you get accepted into a school, and this is not just the GSB, this applies for most of the major US schools, and you accept their offer, they will hire a third party company to do a background check. This is kind of a standard background check that a lot of you may be familiar with. If you work for U.S. companies, they will, request transcripts. They will make calls to companies to confirm your job titles, your length of employment, etc. With extracurriculars, certainly if it's a nonprofit, established nonprofit that has a volunteer list, they can check that. I think it sometimes is a little bit harder if it was a student club in college without official records, so it may be a little bit harder. But I'm not sure how they check that now. But certainly, if anything doesn't add up, if they are not able to verify anything, they'll reach out to you and try to resolve that first. The best policy is be honest, and put down things that truly happened on your application, so that you don't get in and get your offer rescinded, right? Okay, so another question here. Let's see. I've got a ton of questions, so I'm trying to scroll up at the top here. Okay, if I have an engineering background and still pursuing my early career in a state-owned mining and energy company, do you have any data related to that? That's a good question. Every year I work with a lot of engineers, a lot of people coming from what we call non-traditional industries. Non-traditional be almost anything outside of finance, consulting, maybe consumer products, etc. So certainly mining and in energy. That sector does not send a ton of MBA candidates, but still every year I work with quite a few from that background, and I would say it's number one, you're differentiated, so that's the pro, that's the positive. However, you do have to show or explain why you want an MBA. So that is similar across the board for anyone, whether you're on the creative side in photography or film, or you're on the engineering side and you want to make a switch to the business side, you do have to explain why and what drives you, what motivates you to switch into business. Okay, so let's skip to the next question. That's a little bit different. When connecting with Adcom, what are some of the questions you can ask them? Yeah, good question. So when you are attending these info sessions online, certainly they're not tracking who's asking questions, so you can feel free to ask any question that you can't find the answers to on the website. If for some reason you're connecting with them one-on-one, certainly same thing, right? So, ask them questions that are specific to you and your career goals. So do your research, try to find out as much as possible about the programs from their websites, from their information sessions, where, I'm sure there'll be lots of other people chiming in and asking a lot of questions already. So, take good notes, make sure that you truly get a strong grasp of their program. And then for anything else that you can't find the answers to, those would be good questions to ask. Okay. VC is tough immediately. This is from Osama. Post MBA for international applicants. For applicants wanting to pursue VC, would you recommend going with an easier short-term goal in the application? Example, consulting, or be upfront? Certainly, VC is venture capital is not considered a immediate post-MBA goal for a lot of applicants. Typically, if you come from the VC world, then certainly it's fine if you write that you want to return to the VC world. If you're trying to switch into the VC world, what we typically recommend is to have that as your long-term goal, and think about what are some stepping stones, short-term goals that you can, what are the jobs that you can get immediately post-MBA, whether it be, usually it's in banking or perhaps in consulting sometimes as well. So what are those jobs that could get you to the VC role in the long term? Long term be, perhaps 15, 20 years down the road. Okay? So that would be that answer. Sevilla, please give some deferred MBA advice for Stanford MBA, how to write essay without much work experience as a student. So the good news is the way that the essay prompts are written, they are very open. You can use examples from school. You can use examples from volunteering. You can use examples from student clubs that you're involved in, the extracurriculars. And what matters most to you, you don't necessarily have to use work stories to support that. You could use your personal stories as well. Okay. Arvind, what are the criteria for award of scholarships? Good question. I think it really depends on what scholarship you're applying to. There are merit scholarships. There are scholarships that are for underrepresented demographics. So you'd have to look at the criteria for the scholarships. Divya, when should one start working with an application consultant if the person hasn't taken any standardized testing yet? Yeah, that's a really good question. So typically for round one, we would suggest starting to work with your consultant in the, I would say, June, July timeframe. July would be the latest. So, we're seeing a lot of people sign up for free consultations right now, talking to us, figuring out who they want to work with and what the game plan is. Even if your Gmat is, let's say, 1st of July, you still want to start the conversation with the recommender, with the consultants, just to get a feel for what that timeline is, who has availability, who's still taking new clients, and so on. For round two, you can start doing that, I would say September, October timeframe. That's usually a good timeframe to start working with consultants. Of course, we do have a lot of people who, start talking to us, months before that. So even if you're applying in round two, but for sure you want to work with a consultant, there's no harm in talking to us early. Usually in the same calendar year that you want to apply is the earliest that I would sign up for a free consultation. Signing up too early doesn't give you that much advantage because there's a lot of things that we still don't know about your profile. So, the advice that we give might not be very specific. So you want to sign up no earlier than the calendar year that you're going to apply. So if you're going to apply this fall, or either round one or round two, now is a really good time to sign up for a free consultation with us. Okay, Arvind, how recent should the stories be in the essay and applications? Unless they specify a time frame, like one of the short questions will ask you in the last 3 years. So then they only want stories in the last 3 years. But for any of the essays and the other short questions, it can be from any time period of your life as long as it's significant, right? So if you have more recent examples of leadership or teamwork, for example, then I would prefer to see more recent examples of you having an achievement. But for some of these stories that are like a inflection point or a major event in your life, that could happen anywhere. That could, I've had clients who were diagnosed with childhood leukemia, and that really kind of changed the way that they thought about themselves and health. And so that happened in their childhood, and that's okay. It was that major event. So it really depends on what you're trying to showcase. Abhishek, does being from consulting finance background give the candidate an edge of some sort? given that most of these candidates come from these industries. So, of course, there are pros and cons, right? The pros is, you already have some business training, you have probably a ton of business training, you have relevant experience that's applicable for business school. The con is, of course, there are so many people applying from consulting and finance. How do you differentiate yourself? When we work with clients, and when we're brainstorming the stories for the essays, that's certainly something that we pay a lot of attention to for the clients coming from consulting and finance. How do we differentiate them from everybody else? How do we make them interesting, compelling, and unique? Okay. All right. In the second short question, how do we define our background? Does it only include the studies that we did our undergrad, or does it include something more than that? Yeah, that's a good question. So you can use your background from any time period in your life. It can be a personal story from your family or the way you grew up. It could be from college. So, just to give you one example, it could be when you were growing up, you took care of your sick grandmother, and that gave you a lot of compassion, or that made you really interested in the healthcare industry, right? So that could be that personal background story. It could be from any part of your life. Okay. Next question. In your opinion, what makes the GSB take a glance at non-large consulting firm applicants at the first sight? Is it the Gmat score or any other requirements? So if you come from a small boutique consulting firm, that's okay. They're not just looking for the brand name firms. They are looking at what you have done in that role at that firm. So I actually think that for smaller consulting firms, you have an opportunity to really kind of do a lot more. It's not as hierarchical, it's not as structured. So perhaps you have an opportunity to really kind of mentor junior staff or step into leadership roles. So I think they are looking for that. How have you taken advantage of those opportunities? Okay. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to skip to a few questions. If someone is part of organizations like Mensa, is it worth mentioning on the resume? Yeah, certainly. I think that is, something that is that's an achievement, that is something that you're proud of. So yeah, certainly mention it on the resume. So, okay, I think we have probably time for one last question. So I'm just going to pick one that's maybe a little bit different from the ones that I've answered before. I've been working with a private firm, a small, medium size with not many employees or team members, but have a good Gmat score. Is it worth trying for the GSB? Yeah, I think this is similar to what I said just now for the boutique consulting firm. What matters is what you do in that role, how you've made an impact at that company. So I think if you meet all the other criteria of what they're looking for, and the GSB is a dream school for you, definitely give it a shot. Put in your best application. I always tell people the odds may be low, but if you don't apply, you have 0% chance of getting in. So on that note, I want to encourage everybody to shoot for the stars, shoot for the moon. It's tough, but it's not impossible. It's only impossible if you don't apply. Next week, what we're going to cover is the GSB interviews. I know it's a little bit early to think about interviews at this time, but we'll be covering giving you a lot of useful tips and information. No harm in being early and being prepared, right? So join us next week, same time, same place, and we will talk more about the GSB interviews and how you can ace them. And thank you so much, everybody, for taking time off of your evening, afternoon, morning to join us. And I hope that you can join us again next week. And please stay safe and be good to everyone around you and yourself as well. Take care, everyone.